Hey there, my name is Eric and this is Delve, the official thought leadership podcast of the Desautels Faculty of Management at McGill University. So I'm a journalist and producer here at McGill, and today we're delving into the world of startups.
It's really messy in the world of startups, how jobs are created, how they're filled, that things change in ways that you might not predict that they change.
So that was Professor Lisa Cohen, an expert in organizational behavior. And in some of her research, she studied how startups go about creating jobs. So by this I mean, what kind of tasks and responsibilities should actually go into the job description? What kinds of skills does my company need to keep growing? How can I ensure that I'm hiring the right people to fulfill my company's mission? So now, these are never easy questions, but that's especially true when it's a startup environment. Small teams mean every person has a huge impact on the outcome of the company. And as the company grows, its needs are probably going to change a lot. So that just makes it even harder to find the right help for the long haul. So if you're at a startup experiencing some growing pains and you're looking to hire some help, let's see if we can help things along with some insights from Professor Lisa Cohen. So let's delve into it. Okay, well, Professor Lisa Cohen, welcome to the Delve podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm quite excited that you're here because we're going to talk about something that I find quite fascinating. So that's kind of how startups bring people into their operation and how they kind of grow past that sort of all hands on deck, like small team, high, fast-paced environment, everyone does everything kind of phase. And how do we move out of that and into a space where there's more people and maybe more structure and more division of labor? And what kind of jumped out at me going through some of your work was just how little research there has been done, just sort of on that process of job creation in the startup environment. So my first question is just kind of why do you think that is?
Yeah, excellent question. I think that there's a little bit of an obsession in research on startups with the founders and what the founders do and what the founders' job is and what experience the founders have. And people haven't done quite so much looking beyond the founder to the people who have ongoing roles and how they're brought in and how their jobs are designed. And I suspect as well, nobody realizes how important this is, but it is a crucial step in startup development. You can't grow if you can't create new jobs and bring people in to do those jobs. You don't have structure if you don't have jobs. Jobs are one of the things, along with routines, that really are the structure of organizations. So I don't understand why nobody looks at it, but I find it a really great thing to look at to really understand how startups work.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I guess because it's really getting into the weeds of like, how do you run this organization? And I don't know, so you've been looking at it for a while. So what have you been finding so far in some of your work?
I find that it's messy. It's really messy in the world of startups, how jobs are created, how they're filled, that things change in ways that you might not predict that they change. So there's this idea among HR specialists that the best way to create a job is you define that job in advance. You know what it is. You know what the skills are. Except in startups, you don't know. And you make mistakes. You may not have enough experience with creating jobs. You might not know what those jobs are going to be in 5 years because everything is changing. You might be creating a job that didn't exist before. And so I see a lot of that. And as a result of that, I see a lot of changes in jobs, and I see a lot of hiring and a lot of exit as well.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit more about what's unique to that context? Like what's unusual about the startup environment here?
So I'll start with the founders. Sometimes you have a founder who's a repeat founder and who really knows what they are doing. But a lot of times you have a founder who is clueless, doesn't know, hasn't actually been a manager. The founder is there because they have great technical skills, but they don't have the kind of skills you need to create a job and to hire people. And they often don't realize what they don't know. I think a lot of people suffer from this illusion that they actually know what they're doing when it comes to hiring. They know what's best, forget all of the really wise resources in the world. I know who I should hire. I know what skills they should have. And so you have that problem. But it's not all about the founder. It's also about the people surrounding the founder who like the founder, don't have that information or don't share it. The founder or the head of a big established organization can look around and see lots of people and lots of models for job design, but there's nothing in a startup. You might have 3 other people you could look at for ideas. So they're just not there. And then there's the situation you're in. Especially if you're talking about a tech startup, you may be doing things that nobody has ever done before. This might be a job that doesn't exist, and there's no place for you to go out and look and find a model. And you add to that startups, almost by definition, are highly dynamic. They're always changing, and you're always going to have the need to make some changes to those jobs. And so it's hard to imagine in day 1 what you need on day 700. And that makes it all the more difficult.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then who's typically involved in this kind of brainstorming phase? So you have the founder, maybe a VC, or I don't know. I'm curious.
So the sort of old saw is that it is all about the manager. The manager designs the job. The manager figures out what they want, and how they want to achieve it, what characteristics they're looking for, and they bundle the tasks together and figure out what the skills are, and then they go out and find the person who's the perfect match. That's part of the picture. The managers or the founders are really important in this process, but there's much more. Once you fill a job, it becomes somebody's job, and that person, the job incumbent, the employee, has a lot of say in what that job looks like. For instance, if that person doesn't match the job as you designed it in terms of the skills, they may launch in efforts to change that job, to craft or sculpt that job to be a better fit for what they want, and maybe even a better fit for what you need. So that's one piece of it. Another piece of it is there are a lot of outsiders who get involved in this. You have governments who have ideas about what jobs should look like, how they should be paid. So there are those regulations. There are academics. I have lots of ideas about job design, and I imagine some people might actually read some of the ideas that I or other experts on hiring, what they have to say. Startups have investors, and those investors, it turns out, care quite a bit about the jobs in the startup. They care that the jobs make sense, that people are doing the right things, that you are hiring people who are full-time, that you have diversity in terms of the skills. You don't just have 5 engineers on your team. You might want to throw in a political scientist just for good measure. So there are those many outsiders who have a role in job design.
So, all right, just jumping in with a quick recap of what we've covered so far. So, startups are constantly changing and growing. It's hard to design a role and hire someone for it if you don't know what skills you're going to need in 2 years' time. And we also talked about where startup leaders get their ideas on what kinds of jobs need to get done, what skills they require, and who can fulfill those roles. And that's hard to do, especially if you're in an industry that's very new and doesn't have any pre-established customs or norms on how to do things. So how does this all affect the long-term operations of a startup? And how does this compare to the job design process at bigger, more established companies? So that's coming up next. So let's say you identify a need and you have an idea of what a job can look like. And then there's the matter, and you might have pulled these ideas from a bunch of different places that are similar to your organization, but maybe aren't an exact match to what you're trying to accomplish. How do you translate that? How do you transpose something from this environment and make it work in the environment that I need it to work in?
Yeah, I think there is the sort of more theoretical part where you tweak the job and you make changes. You decide, I don't need that task done. I need this one done instead. And oh, by the way, there are some tasks lying over there that nobody is doing. So I'll just throw those in there. So that's part of the process. One of the things I've learned in my research is it also changes a lot during the hiring process. So you want to hire an X. Maybe it's a growth hacker, and you have some ideas about what a growth hacker should do, but you're not really sure. And you start interviewing people. And through that process, you actually learn about what that job should look like, and you change it, right? That's how you figure out what the job should be, rather than try to design it in a vacuum. Or what can also happen is that there can be enormous changes in your situation. You might have this idea that you want to hire, again, the sales manager, and set out and interview and find the perfect person. And then suddenly you realize you are in big trouble because you have no sales for that person to manage. I saw that particular thing happen. The person who was hired was then asked, well, we want you to just take a lead generation job. You're just going to generate leads and the other salesperson is going to follow through. He wasn't happy, but he took the job because he really wanted to try out this startup thing. And there was a promise that it would change, but over time, it just kept not changing. And that resulted in lots of conflict between him and his manager. And eventually he left the job. Not only did he leave the job, he left all startups altogether because that was such a bad experience. But the point is, or one of the points to take away, is that you start with an idea of a job, but it is going to change in the process. And that might not be what happens at a bigger, more established company. I think startups are particularly susceptible to those kinds of changes.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's interesting. So, yeah, I mean, you talked a little bit about, finding people who might have the right skill set, but maybe being pleasantly surprised when you find someone who's maybe not quite the right match, but seems to bring something else to the table. It seems really valuable. But yeah, I'm curious, is there a danger there of like maybe having not enough of an idea before you reach out, before you put out a posting, and just meeting people and seeing what's out there? Or
there's a huge danger. And I see that in my data. What often happened in the jobs where they went out looking for someone before they knew what they wanted, that person rarely lasted very long. Within a year, a lot of those people were gone from the organization. The job was not reposted and refilled. On the other hand, there were some jobs where there were changes because of other circumstances where it actually worked. where the job stayed the job and some stability was realized moving forward.
Oh, wow. Can you speak a little bit to why one worked and one didn't?
I think in the first case, it's about not really thinking it through in advance. In the second case, where external events, exogenous events bring about the change, you have really thought it through, but are open and flexible to change, to do something slightly different. And I think that kind of flexibility actually is important for a startup and so isn't damaging, but I think the going in without knowing anything is not a good recipe.
And that strikes me as something that distinguishes startups quite a bit from maybe more large, like established organizations. Like, I don't know if they've, like, I don't know, a Fortune 500 probably doesn't have the same freedom to just, let's just see who's out there. Who can we bring on that might be able to help, even if we don't have a specific role in mind?
Yeah, and I think that some of this does happen in big established companies. There are many one-off jobs, but I think there are also a lot of jobs that are established and that can't just be built or rebuilt around whoever happens to pass by. If you have 20 developers, you can't have everyone have their own special job in the way you can when you have a startup.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I see. Well, yeah. I mean, when you think about that difference between startups versus big organizations, like, I don't know, like, what are some of the biggest difference that you see there in terms of how they operate and how they approach the job creation process?
Big organizations have human resource departments, and that is the biggest difference.
Right.
They have professionals who actually know what they're doing and know how this should happen. And the startup founders might be smart, they might know something, but they don't necessarily have a professional in the room. And that is why you have things like investors getting very involved in the process of job design and hiring in a way that wouldn't happen in an established firm.
And I mean, and it sounds too like hiring at that stage of your startup has a big impact.
Well, a huge impact. Think about this. You are hiring employee number 5, not 50, not 500, not 5,000. And that is not a little drop in the bucket. That's 20% of your workforce. Mm-hmm. And so it does have a much bigger impact. It has a much bigger impact in terms of the skills you have available, but also in terms of the personalities, the culture that you can build, interactions. It's much bigger and much more important at that stage.
So how do you know you got it right?
You never know if you got it right. One answer would be, the job still exists.
Right.
So something must be good. Except, what if the job is wrong? It might be that you need to get rid of the job. So what I've learned is there are these real trade-offs in these jobs between having the stability you need to really grow and go forward, but also having the flexibility, the adaptability to manage with whatever situations are in front of you.
Yeah. So then how do you know a job is wrong? So does that just mean like it's not meeting the current needs of the organization, or maybe the mission has changed, or what are some signs?
So let's try to imagine a job that was right. And there are certain ways that job can become wrong. One, it can be the wrong job for the person in the job, in which case maybe it is the right job and the wrong person. Another way is that you have changed what you're doing as an organization. You thought you were going to provide raw data to people, but instead you're going to provide thoughtful analysis. Well, you need some different people in place to do that, different people in very different jobs.
Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, I mean, on the topic of more established firms, I mean, I think this might be my last question, but I don't know, what can startups learn from bigger companies who have been around a while?
I think they can get a great starting point, a great idea of what a structure might look like, and that they need to then figure out how they should adapt that structure to fit with what they need. And I guess the other question is, what can established companies learn from the startups? Mm-hmm. And that might be something about learning how to be more flexible about jobs, about the design of jobs. There are organizations that are good at doing it. Even very established bureaucracies have some flexibility in their jobs. But I think more broadly, big established companies can learn how to be less of a dinosaur from startups.
Yeah, adopt a startup mindset, I guess.
Yeah. Not for everything.
Yeah.
Don't give up the knowledge you have built.
This is true.
Right?
That's true.
Don't ignore that.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, Professor Cohen, this is exciting stuff. I think, painting a picture of how these startups work, I think is an important project. And I'm glad that you're working on it. And I'm grateful that you're able to share some of that with us today.
Thanks for listening.
All right, and that's the show. Thanks so much for listening. So I hope you pulled out some interesting learnings and insights about startups as you listened through this episode. And if you liked what you heard, please tell us about it. Send us an email at delve@mcgill.ca. We love hearing from you about what you do and don't like, so we can keep producing great thought leadership content that you enjoy and find useful. So a special thanks to Professor Lisa Cohen for sharing her insights with us today. And if you want to learn more about her work, check out her research linked in the show notes. So McGill Delve is the official thought leadership platform for the Desautels Faculty of Management at McGill University. This episode was produced, edited, and hosted by me, Eric Dicaire, and Professor Saku Mantere is our editor-in-chief. And he also produced all the original music. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.